Hello and welcome to the Homesick to Happy Movers podcast. I am Keisha Ellingson and I help people who have moved to a new area heal homesickness by leading them through the process of creating connection and excitement in their new area, even if they are super shy. And today we're talking about emotional intelligence because that comes into play in a huge way when you're moving or walking through a big life transition. And Megan Dale is here, and she is a leader in helping women heal their relationship with food and their body, as well as a teacher of emotional intelligence. She's a trim, healthy mama coach, a Revelation wellness instructor, and she has her doctorate in physical therapy. She teaches women how to protect their peace and freedom in their mind and their body. So Megan, thank you so much for joining us on the podcast today.
Yes, I'm so excited to be here.
Yeah, this is going to be a really good conversation. So let's jump into the meat and potatoes of this. And could you share what emotional intelligence is and how you got started in this journey?
Okay. So for me, I'm saying emotional intelligence is understanding what my body is telling me and how my emotions and how I react to a situation. And then having awareness to be able to recognize what's truly going on, and then to be able to have the freedom and the choice to act how I actually want to act, and not from a place of freak out or panic. Like my freak out or my panic isn't the one that's responding. I'm able to regulate myself and then be able to be like, what's going on? And I can respond to that. I like to say in the fruit of the spirit, love, joy, peace, patience. Like that's my goal. That's my highest goal, is to be able to have a life happen and respond in the fruit of the spirit. What started me on this journey is that I have struggled with losing weight and gaining weight over and over again. And for me, there was a lot of pressure around performing. I don't know, have you ever felt like you needed to perform in order to receive love?
Yes, yeah.
So I did all the things. I did all the sports, like subconsciously, I didn't even know what was going on at the time, but I did all the sports. I did all the AP classes. I graduated early, like I was a high performer. But that puts so much pressure on you that I couldn't regulate my nervous system. I felt the pressure in my body. And so I would then respond by running to the pantry, running to the refrigerator. That was my coping mechanism, because it was like the good girl Christian thing to do, instead of like going to alcohol or other things that are like shunned upon. We all have a coping mechanism that we run to, scrolling social media, watching, binging Netflix. There's so many things that can be coping mechanism. Mine was food. And so I would be like, I really desire to have a healthy weight, to be healthy, but the pressure of everything was like overcoming my desire to be able to choose a healthy food option. So as a mom, that really made me serious about like, I've got to get a control over this. Like, what is going on? And when I was going through graduate school, I started learning about the nervous system and what it does and how it works. And I was like, oh my goodness, I am actually operating outside of a balanced nervous system. And so I started tracking my nervous system responses, and I put correlations to when my nervous system felt out of order was when I was not having a good emotional intelligent moment. And that was when I was running to food. So all of those desires to have growth, and then my bad habit, and then understanding what the nervous system does, led me into really learning this, integrating it and embodying it for myself. And then I was like, nobody taught me and let me collapse time for other women. And I was teaching it to my children, and people were asking, help me teach this to my children as well. So that's kind of really how I got started. I wanted to lose weight. And I was learning that my emotions were a thing that was actually keeping me from being able to choose healthy choices when life felt overwhelming, stressful. There was a lot of pressure. I wasn't able to choose those healthy options until I worked on and healed my relationship with my body and with food, and having a high level of emotional intelligence really brought in healing and freedom for that.
Yeah, that's an awesome story. And I feel like emotional intelligence touches on every part of our life, like whether we are aware of it or not.
Mm-hmm.
It's a common theme throughout our life. So does emotional intelligence help kids who are going through big changes like a move?
Yes. For me, some of the things, like we've moved 1, 2, 3, 4 times. We've moved four or five times, and we transitioned from public school to homeschool. So we had to navigate all of those things with our children. And a lot of it was teaching them, like, when they were feeling frustrated, what do you do? When you're feeling overwhelmed, what do you do? When you have an immense amount of anger because you don't want to move, but we have to move, what do you do? When you have so much sadness because you're moving and you feel like you're going to miss your friends, what do you do? It's all about understanding and allowing for those emotions to come without thought. Like, it's not bad that we're feeling sad. It's not bad that we're feeling mad. It's our responses to them that cause the problem. So one, we have to recognize what they are and help our kids recognize what they are. And then two, we have to teach them ways to process those emotions.
Yes. Yeah. So as you said, you've walked your kids through a move a few different times. Can you explain some of the things that go on for in your kids' emotional world as they move or make big transitions?
Yeah, the biggest thing for me, I felt like, was they were holding joy for where we were going, and they were holding sadness for where we had been. And oftentimes we let sadness ruin our joy, but we don't know how to let ruin our sadness. And there's a duality in holding both emotions. Can you hold sadness and joy at the same time? Can you be excited for something and also grieving something else at the same time? And teaching them what that feels like, and that it doesn't mean something negative. We take so many things and we create meaning around them. Like, if I'm feeling happy about this thing, that invalidates the sadness, or that I'm not a good friend because I'm excited about moving, but I'm also, that like covers up any emotion of being sad, that I'm not going to see my other friends here. And so then we let sadness ruin our joy and we stay there. And so we can get stuck in a heavier emotion. And then that changes everything, because that's like putting a lens on of glasses, and then all we can see in our world is sadness, or all we can see is that heavier emotion that we're feeling. And it really does affect every area of our lives. But teaching them how to cope and how to process that, and how to make our own healthy meaning, rather than an unhealthy meaning about our emotions, can really help them thrive with major transitions.
Yeah. So could you give an example of like something that you've walked your kids through, like where they've had this lens of sadness on, and what's the next step to helping them remove this lens of sadness?
Okay, so oftentimes it comes out as anger. Anger is fear's bodyguard. So anger is the bodyguard to fear. So and then fear is the mask that sadness wears. So most of the time we don't see our children often being sad. We see them being mad. They're angry, they're frustrated, and it's covering up a fear. So when my children, especially my son, starts to exhibit frustration, knowing that process of anger, then fear, then sadness, the root is a sadness. I will ask him questions of, like, when he's angry, I'll be like, hey buddy, what are you afraid of right now? What do you feel like you're missing out on? And I start to ask questions that would expose the fear. Like, let's just bring it to the table, because covering it up and hiding isn't getting anybody healing. We've got to process it. And usually he'll start to tell me something, and I can easily see where he's choosing sadness, where there's a sadness. And where there's sadness is where we get to let love in. So exposing the thing of sadness and letting love in, and like sitting with him. Like, I'm not going to cover up the pain. I'm going to sit with him. I'm going to hold space for the pain. Even as a parent, when I'm like, that doesn't even make sense. You shouldn't even be mad or sad about that. Like, I'm not pushing any projection. I'm just getting curious. I'm just asking for understanding. And it's not our job to fix them. It's our job to allow them to cope with them and teach them helping coping mechanisms, because ultimately it's their choice. But asking questions when they're mad really helps expose where they actually sad. And sometimes the thing they're sad about is really sad. Like, we moved this last time, and they had friends that lived just down the road, and he would get angry, and I would ask him, like, buddy, what are you afraid of? Well, I'm afraid I'm never going to see him again. Like, so he's afraid of missing out. He's afraid of forgetting a friend. He's also afraid of being forgotten. That's some serious identity training.
Yeah.
Into that. And so I'll be like, oh, that would make me really sad too. And then acknowledging that he's actually sad underneath of it all helps him then just release the sad emotion. And when we release the emotion, instead of pushing it, voiding it, covering it up, stuffing it down, it gets out. And then he's like I can breathe now, because that emotion isn't stuck in my body. It's actually out of my body. And so we process the sadness. Like, that would be really sad if you never saw them again. But how can we, like, what are things that we can do to help with that? Well, you can FaceTime him. What if we put it in our calendar once a week for a while that you FaceTimed your friend? Do you want me to have a conversation with their mom to be able to do that? What if we, in the summer, when they're off of school, what if we, every summer, we made a trip to spend the entire day together? And instantly, like, that exhale happens, that like, oh my gosh, like, and then hope gets restored, joy gets restored. Like, there's so many things that we can rise them up out of a fear of being forgotten, or a fear of forgetting. They don't want to forget, because what happens if we forget about somebody? What meaning do we make it as a person? If you've forgotten somebody, what are you going to make that mean about you? Because we've been told by the world that it has to mean something negative, instead of being like, I love them. And even though I'm not around them, I will always love them. And that means that I love them. It doesn't mean that if I don't text them every day, or if I don't FaceTime them, or if we don't get together a lot, it doesn't change my love for them. I still love them. So also helping them create meaning. Like, it doesn't mean anything negative if we haven't seen them for a while. It doesn't mean anything negative if you only see them once a year. We're going to have the best time when we spend with them, and it's going to be so connected and so fun, and it's going to be like we never missed a beat of being with each other. We're going to have the most fun. So after we uncover the sadness, then we get to the point where we start to create hope and excitement, and we start to plan. Like, turn on a happy song and be like, let's get sticky notes and write what we want to do with them. And that stirs up joy. And this is where joy gets to ruin the sadness, instead of sadness always ruining the joy. How many times have we been taught, don't get your hopes up, you might be disappointed? But life is full of disappointment. Is life full of hope? Why don't we have hope all the time and then learn to process disappointment, instead of having boredom or contentment, because we don't want to be disappointed? So we live at a lower level emotionally, and then we very rarely experience a higher emotion of love, joy, peace, hope, because we don't want to be disappointed. Rather, as a parent, I can equip my kids what to do with the disappointment, and let's live life fully alive.
Yes, yes. I feel like this is like an amen moment. Like I agree so much with what you're saying. And um, I love how not only do you, define what it is with your kids, but you redefine. Like, for instance, like when your kids are like, well, what if I forget? Like that's something that my son is walking through too, because we're, another move's coming up. And right now he has this fear of what if I forget them and what if they forget me? And I can tell that it has a negative feeling. Like he has a negative feeling paired with it. So I love how you are noticing it, but then redefining it for your kids.
Mm-hmm.
That's great stuff. So do you have any easy ways to explain all these big emotions to kids?
So there's a thing called, it's a thing that I use in physical therapy when I work with younger kids, and it's a pain scale. And you can just look up FACES pain scale. And it's meant for like physical pain, but it can also be used for emotional pain, or you can just pull up Google like different emotional faces. There's charts everywhere. Having a visual picture of what your face does when you feel an emotion really helps the kids. Mine are 11 and 9 now. They'll still ask me when they get hurt, can you bring up the faces scale? I want to see the faces. Or my daughter just got hurt the other day. She's like, Mom, it's the face where the mouth is like this. Like I'm not happy and I'm not sad, but I'm like, my face is like this. Mm-hmm. So if we're wanting to process and teach our kids emotions, get pictures, get a visual of all the different emotions, and let them choose which one do you feel right now. And we do this when things are amazing. My daughter just hit a home run last night. We'll like talk about it and celebrate it and, just rejoice in it. And we'll do this for days. Like it will be days. We'll hold the joy of that moment for days. Because here's the thing. If we're afraid that disappointment is going to ruin our hope, we've got to teach them how to process the disappointment, and we have to teach them how to get back to hope.
Yes. Yeah.
So getting back to hope comes from being so excited and compounding the excitement with gratitude and like I'll be like, oh my gosh, you're a home run hitter. The home run hitter just walked into the living room. Like we're going to do this for days. And she's going to get excited and she's going to smile and it's going to bring light to her. And she's going to easily subconsciously recognize when I have a good moment, I know how to relish in the good moment. And it doesn't mean I have to be afraid of a bad moment because it's life. We're going to have good and bad. I need to teach them how to experience the good with pure bliss. And I need to teach them how to experience the hard and know how to get back out of the hard, back into the pure bliss again.
Yeah. So what practical steps can the listeners take to start teaching their kids today?
So the biggest thing would just be holding space for the emotion that you're seeing. If you're seeing fear, verbalize it. Hey, buddy, I see that this brings up fear for you. Hey, buddy, I see that you're sad right now. Like, hey, I see you got some anger going on. Let's have a conversation. And they may not be able to verbalize it, but we can verbalize it for them. So even when we start at like, when you take a toy away from a 9-month-old and they're like whacking you and they don't have the ability to express, but they can hear you. Like by 9 months, sometimes they even know the word no and then they cry because you told them no at 9, so even really, really young, start verbalizing the emotion that you're seeing it without making meaning. It doesn't mean anything if they're sad. It doesn't mean anything to you as a mom if they're scared to move. It doesn't mean anything of you as a mom if they're feeling sad about being forgotten. It doesn't mean anything about you. And oftentimes our children's emotions will trigger our own past unprocessed emotions. So when we can just verbalize the emotion that we're seeing with them and just starting to ask questions and get curious, not in a like, the curious of like, we're trying to like quiz them, but just like in this relaxed, like, hey, come sit with me on the couch. I see you're sad. Or if they're crying because they got hurt, do you need a hug? Do you need me to kiss it? Do you need me to hold you? If they're crying, do you need a hug? Like ask them questions of what they feel like they need. They'll tell you. And they're going with the understanding they're not going to stay stuck in that emotion. Emotions come in like a wave. So you might be holding them, and it might be your first time that you're like ever holding them while they're sad, instead of being like, how many times have you heard, if you don't be quiet, I'm going to give you something to be quiet about. If you don't quit crying, I'm going to give you something to quit crying about. So if that's been your coping mechanism with your children, it's okay. Take a deep breath. There's a grace for you. And the first time you may hold them while they may cry a lot because they may have they may have lots to cry about. Just keep holding them. It will get shorter. They will learn how to process out of it. And their emotions doesn't dictate a negative meaning about who we are as a parent, mostly because we've not been trained. If you haven't been trained how to have emotional intelligence for yourself, you can't get down on yourself because your child is needing to process emotions and you haven't been trained how to do it yourself. How in the world are you going to teach them? Until someone comes along and teaches you, you can't hold yourself to a standard of knowing something that you didn't know.
Yes, yeah, 100%. And I love how you mentioned like just holding them and holding that space for emotions. Are there other ways that you hold space for your kids' emotions?
Sometimes if they need to be angry and they still need to be angry, I'm like, okay, well, this is the place. This is how we be angry. And that might mean you might need to go in your room and scream in your pillow. You might need to go play a game of basketball to like beat the ball down. You might need to go play some baseball to like swing the bat. Like moving our body can get emotion out of us. So coming up with like, if they're sad, would it be great to have some warm tea? What about snuggling up with your stuffy and we sit on the couch and read a book? Do you want to light a candle while we read a book? Like my daughter would love that. Let's get the softest blanket that we have when she's sad and let's sit on my lap, and she's probably going to snuggle her body as close to mine as she can get. And I'm like, Kenna, you can't sit on my lap even any more than what you already are. You're already on my lap. So let's blanket and your stuffed animal, and we're going to give your physical body comfort, and we're going to be connected. Most of the time they need connection or they need space for both.
Yes. Yeah, that's awesome. And so you have a course that teaches about kids, emotions, and taking thoughts captive, and answers the question, how do I help my kids when I'm struggling myself? Can you share about that?
Yeah, so that is a master class that I titled it Royalty, because it's all about the identity that we believe we are. If our children are fearing being forgotten, that comes down to identity. And so often all of these things have happened. They have life experiences and they have an identity, and that identity stays with them. So for me, it was like, I'm in the process of healing my relationship with my body and my food, and not going to food instead of processing the emotion that's coming up. But how do I help my children when I'm in the process of healing myself? And so I walked through the journey of what I did. It's a five recordings. It's a smaller program, but it really gives you some tactile tools. Like we even use a crown, and I bought poop mold off of Amazon and teach how to take thoughts captive and how to regulate our emotions with a tiara and a poop mold. And it works wonders for my daughter. And so I process that of how to process these emotions, along with like healing our relationship with our bodies, healing our relationship with our emotion, and healing our relationship with food. It's a very condensed program. It's like $22. It's a very easy yes to just get you started on the process of helping heal their relationship with their emotions and their bodies, while you're like, as a mom, I'm still working on this. Like, I'm not an expert, but I recognize they need help too, and I've got to give them something.
Yes, that's awesome. And I feel like you're breaking chains for not only the mom, but the kids. It's like a generational change.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
which is
I
amazing.
mean, we're changing everything. Have you seen the picture where it's like the dad is screaming at the son, which is actually like the grandpa is screaming at the dad, and the dad is screaming at the son. And then there's this wall where the son is like, no more. And he's like bent down, giving his son a hug. Like, we're cutting off ties to having so much pressure, and we're allowing ourselves to be human and to have a new identity and healing, and allowing ourselves to process and cope with the things that life throws at us, but not from a place of I'm working for worthiness and love, from a place of I am loved, I am worthy, I was born worthy, and nothing has changed, and now I can process life. It's two totally different thoughts.
Yeah, and two totally different outcomes.
Mm-hmm.
That's awesome. So what last piece of an encouragement do you have for parents who are walking their kids through a move?
I would just say, start having a pre-game conversation. Before the move, start having conversation about it. Hey, we're going to be moving. And then what I start to do is I bring in hope first. So I'll be like, we're going to be across the street from the park. We're going to be 5 minutes away from your cousin's. Grandma's house is 2 blocks away. And we start to envision the new life of all the fun and exciting things that we get to do. We start with hope first. And we pregame talk, and we have multiple conversations about that before it actually happens. We have conversations about it in the middle, and we have a post-game talk. We have conversations about it in the end. So there's so many conversations. And then we will also ask them, like, after I'm building up their hope and their joy and their excitement, I let them have space for sadness too. What are you going to miss? What do you love about this house that you feel like you're going to miss? Let's do that one more time. Let's make sure you have a bubble bath in the jetted tub one more time, because our new house doesn't have a bubble bath in the jetted tub.
Mm-hmm.
And we give lots of conversation about both having conversation about it, opening up ways where they feel free to communicate, because most of the time we don't even need to do anything. They just need the space to verbally process.
Yes, this is awesome. Well, thank you, Megan, for coming on the podcast. This has been an amazing conversation. And for the listeners, I just want to let you know that Megan is coming back next week. So emotional intelligence for kids, this conversation has been great, but we're going to even continue it further into emotional intelligence for women, because there's a whole lot more that we could cover. So check in next week to the podcast, and we'll see you there.